I want to tell you about a strange, unsettling friend I had. You know, the kind of person who's always smiling, the kind who never speaks ill of anyone, always smiling like they're harmless. I had one in my middle school. His name was Riku. By chance, we became friends. He had a neat side part and squinty eyes, not exactly ugly, but just a regular face. He was of average height, the kind of guy you'd expect to see in a manga. Also, his posture was impeccable. It was like he had a ruler stuck in his back. For some reason, Riku was hated by almost everyone in our class. Middle schoolers can be sensitive. Even the smallest things would set off big fights, and bullying happened too. At the time, I just thought it was normal, so I didn't really mind it. But Riku was different. He was the kind of person who didn't make you feel uncomfortable, and his laugh was refined. He didn't laugh obnoxiously, you know, it was quiet, and I liked that about him. The people who talked behind his back didn't seem to care about me, so we stayed friends for a while. But Riku had some odd quirks. First, he never ate school lunch. He wouldn't even take a bite. Even when our teacher scolded him, he didn't care. I've never seen Riku eat anything in front of me. Then there was the smell. Sometimes he smelled faintly like something green, like vegetable juice or some plant-like odor. The kids who bullied him would shout, "You stink," so I'm pretty sure it wasn't just me who noticed. There was also the fact that he refused to talk about his family. He would never, ever mention them. He wouldn't even tell us where he lived. I didn't have many friends, so Riku was important to me. I always thought he was a bit strange, but it didn't bother me. So I'd often try to comfort him, saying, "Don't worry about it." Since we were both in the cultural club, our after-school activities weren't too intense. We'd often hang out at my place after school. Apparently, Riku's parents were strict, and he couldn't buy games or anything. He seemed to dive into games when we played, and I really enjoyed those times. He'd stay until dinner time at my place and leave around evening. It wasn't every day, though. He went to cram school, so he came over about twice a week. Riku was really smart. He was always at the top of the class during exams. I used to ask him for help with studying. My mom got really excited when I mentioned how smart Riku was. "You don't have to worry about the money. Go to the same cram school as Riku," she said. I didn't think much of it, just curious, so I asked, "Which cram school do you go to?" He hesitated for a moment, then replied, "I don't want to say." You know, Riku was a yes man. Even when he was assigned tasks he didn't like, he'd smile and say, "Okay." I bet the bullies got bored of him since nothing ever seemed to bother him. But now he was saying no. I was taken aback at first, but as time passed, I grew frustrated and thought of something bad. I decided to follow him. Cram schools are usually by the station. Even in the countryside, it's the same, so I knew he'd probably head toward the station. Riku went to cram school on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. After thinking it over, I chose to follow him on Friday. After we split at the usual intersection, I took a detour and went down a back street. I followed the direction toward the station. Following someone is easier than I thought to myself. When I reached the station area, I saw a bunch of signs. I was trying to figure out where Riku was headed, but he didn't go into any of the buildings. He just walked straight past the station. It wasn't a cram school near the station either. Something was off, but I kept following him. Soon, the buildings grew sparse, and I found myself in a narrow alley. I was still keeping my distance from Riku while aimlessly following him. Then suddenly, a white compact car stopped right in front of me. The driver, a young woman who looked about 20, leaned out of the window. She had a strange, hoarse voice. It wasn't like a drunken voice, but it sounded damaged in some way. She looked at me and gave a creepy smile, just like Riku's. Her smile was unnerving. She was pretty, but her makeup was way too thick, like those celebrity impersonators. The eyes were completely dark, and it made me feel uneasy just looking at her. She asked, "Are you Kenji?" I was completely freaked out. I hesitated, unsure what to say, and mumbled, yeah." She smirked, "I thought so. I'm Riku's mother." Her voice was sticky and flat. When she finished speaking, she grinned again. Even now, when I think of that smile, I get chills. At first, I was stunned. She seemed way too young to be Riku's mother. I even wondered if she was his stepmom. I tried to walk past her with a quick bow, but she called out again. "Get in, I'll take you home." I looked at the car more closely. It was badly rusted, with paint chipping off. Riku was nowhere in sight. He must have slipped away while I was talking to his mother. Honestly, I wanted to run. She was a dangerous person, my instincts told me. But since she claimed to be Riku's mom, I hesitated. I figured it might be worth asking her about the cram school, so I decided to get in. The car smelled of cigarette butts, with ash all over the place. Regret hit me almost immediately after getting in the car. She didn't tell me where we were going, just started driving. I asked, "Where are we headed?" She simply replied, "Home." But the direction wasn't toward my house. It seemed like she was heading to Riku's place, and I didn't like it, but a part of me was curious. After all, Riku had been so adamant about not letting anyone know where he lived. The car was playing some bizarre classical music. From the backseat, I noticed that she looked young. Her skin gave away her age. She was definitely in her 20s, and that made me think she really could be Riku's mother. When we arrived at the house, I felt uneasy. It was a simple, worn-down house in an area I hardly ever went to. Her house was nothing special, just a rundown one-story house. Riku had always seemed well off, so this place didn't match up with the image I had in my mind. I wanted to leave right away, but then she mentioned, "I'll tell Riku you came by." That made me freeze. She had me by the throat, so to speak. After thinking it over, I reluctantly agreed to go inside. She greeted me with the same unnerving grin. The house was small, messy, and cramped. There was a lot of old junk lying around, with bags of trash left out in corners. I felt like something was off about it, but I didn't want to confront her, so I just went along. As I stepped into the living room, I could sense something dark waiting. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I had a feeling it wouldn't be good. Is it called a wavy board? That transparent board that undulates? It looks like it's been there for a while, with some parts reinforced. The inside of the house was a clear mess, you could tell right away. But it wasn't like one of those hoarder homes you see on TV. The disorder was obvious. It was just the kind of place that screamed untidy. There were flyers from months ago on the floor, and magazines scattered everywhere with no sense of order. The garbage was in plastic bags, but it hadn't been taken out. It was honestly hard to believe Riku even lived here. I was led through the entrance to the living room. The living room was actually pretty spacious. It must have been around 12 tatami mats. "Sit anywhere, I'll make dinner now," Riku's mother said before heading to the small, dirty kitchen. I thought to myself, come on, give me a break. I'm kind of a clean freak, you know. I can't even eat rice balls that a friend's mom made for me. I glanced over at the kitchen and there were piles of unwashed dishes. The sight made my appetite vanish. But there was another issue. There was someone sitting right in front of me at the table. A woman, thin and frail, she just sat there silently. She looked young too. But she was Riku's little sister. She was definitely older than me, about the same age as Riku's mother. She was only wearing a camisole and she looked freezing. Normally, as a middle school boy, you'd get excited seeing a woman dressed so revealing, right? But I didn't feel anything. This woman looked like a skeleton, so thin. Even when I walked into the room, she didn't even glance at me. She just sat there stiffly, staring off into space. Riku's mother, of course, didn't acknowledge her. She hummed a little tune while preparing dinner. Now I understood perfectly why Riku didn't want to invite me here. It didn't take long. Riku's mother came over with some bowls, one for me and one for the other woman. When I saw the food, I immediately regretted coming here. What was served was a green, gooey mess. It looked kind of like porridge, but it wasn't anything as innocent as grass porridge. It was a dirtier color, more like moss. It didn't seem like they even bothered to wash the bowls. The rim of the bowl had something crusted on it. The oil that separated from the gunk was floating on top, making it shiny. I nearly threw up. I suddenly remembered something. Riku's bad breath, the strange, sharp smell. I couldn't believe it. I looked over at Riku's mother. And there she was, smiling, her eyes telling me to eat. I couldn't bring myself to take a bite, but the other woman dove into it, shoveling it in with her hands, not even looking up. "Aren't you hungry?" Riku's mother asked, laughing so much she had wrinkles. I started thinking, I guess I have to eat it, don't I? And then I heard the sound of the front door opening. I turned toward the entrance and there stood Riku. He had come back. Riku was repeating, almost like he was talking in his sleep, "Why?" His face was pale as a ghost. Before I could try to explain, Riku's mother interrupted. "Welcome home, dinner's ready," she said. Riku wandered toward me, looking like he was in a daze. But his mother seemed annoyed. "Riku, are you even listening?" she asked again. Riku responded, "Yeah, Mom, but why is he here?" That's when it happened. The sweet smile Riku's mother had been wearing turned into a fierce glare. "Don't call me Mom, it's Mother. How many times do I have to tell you? Do you not want to be part of my family, huh? Should I have him come and talk to you?" Her eyes widened, the pupils turning into slits, her face twisted into a monstrous expression. Riku and the other woman were both trembling, and I was utterly confused. "Is it this guy? This guy is the one who messed you up. It's your fault, isn't it? It's all your fault. Riku's messed up because of you. Her fury was now directed at me. I was so terrified I couldn't say anything. I just stood there, stammering, unable to form words. She stomped toward me with the bowl in her hands. I thought she was going to throw the disgusting goo at me. I've got to go. Something came up. I'll leave now," I blurted out. And then, as if nothing had happened, she smiled again. "Oh really? Take care," Riku's mother said, still grinning. Her face, which had been twisted in rage moments before, looked like it had never been angry at all. The next part of the story is a blur. I don't even remember how I got home or what happened afterward. The fact that the next day was Saturday was a blessing. I didn't have to see anyone for a while. When Monday came, Riku didn't show up at school. In fact, I never saw Riku again after that day. He never came back to school, and after a while, I heard he transferred. The teacher said something about a family tragedy. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, so after some time, I asked the teacher about it. The teacher knew about my relationship with Riku, so he told me a little more. Riku's mother had been ill for a long time and had been in the hospital. She had passed away, and Riku's father, who lived far away, had to take care of him, so they moved. I asked the teacher, was Riku's mother the young woman? The teacher seemed confused. She looked about my age. How could that be? A woman in her 50s looked the same as a middle-aged man. So I asked, weren't there two young women? No, the teacher replied. It was just Riku and his father. I didn't see any women. That afternoon, I couldn't help myself and decided to visit Riku's old house. It was that house, the one where I was dropped off by car. The door was unlocked. I expected someone to be there, but there was no sound. Of course, it was natural. It had been over a month since Riku moved. I cautiously walked inside and was shocked to see. The house was just as messy as it had been that day. Riku never lived there, but it was like someone had made themselves at home. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran out of the house in a panic. On my way out, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A white, small car was parked in the yard. I'd known Riku since middle school, but I never knew anything about his past. The bullies were from elementary school. No one would tell me about it. Even now, as an adult, I still don't know. And whenever I see a woman with heavy makeup, I can't help but feel a chill. That woman, who claimed to be his mother, still haunts my mind.